G'day guys, you're back with MiracleMAX. Today we're looking at a Mercedes Sprinter. The guy says that he could be cruising up the road at 110 k's, the EDC light comes on the dash, engine stops and he has to pull over the side of the road, turns the ignition off, then back on again and off he goes for a little while. What's the problem? Let's check it out. I've got this parked outside, not in the workshop, and that's why there's heaps of glare. The amount of K's on it, 529,302. Keep that in mind. Things age with kilometres. Plastic melts, gets hard, O-rings go hard, all sorts of things that will create problems. What I get the customer to do is a customer diagnostic checklist. The goal of that is so that they can give you all the information that you need for a speedy diagnosis. Now, as you know, when you talk to a customer, you get all the information off them as much as possible, but sometimes you might forget a question or two, or perhaps they mightn't remember. But having a physical checklist in front of them, and they sign it down the bottom to say that this is the information correct at the time, and any other information that is relevant is put in here as well. For instance, it says here that the fuel filter was replaced, and I'll give you a little more detail on that shortly. How often does a customer go home and go, oh, that's right, I forgot to tell the guy? Or you get halfway through repairing the job and the customer goes, oh yeah, I forgot to tell you this, and this. And that makes the diagnosis take a different path. So having a diagnostic checklist is crucial for a speedy and successful diagnosis. So what does EDC stand for? This is the owner's manual here. This is the little EDC light that comes up on the dash when you turn the ignition on. I'll just read this section to you. It says, when the key is in the position 2 in the ignition lock, the engine control unit indicator lamp, the EDC, will light up in the instrument cluster. It must go out when the engine is running. If the EDC warning lamp does not go out, or if it comes on while the vehicle is being driven, this indicates that there is a fault on the engine control unit or that the fuel filter needs replacing. The engine's power output may be reduced. Have the cause traced and rectified by a Mercedes-Benz service station. So what does EDC stand for? Electronic Diesel Control. Well, that's very specific, isn't it? Not. So it could be a load of things. What they're saying is the fuel filter might need replacement. Why might it need replacement? Well, perhaps it's blocked, okay? So once they've replaced their fuel filter the first time and it played up afterwards, that might have been an indication that there was some other fault. So replacing it the second time and it's still not fixing it, still might be an indication that there might be another fault. Doing it the third time is definitely an indication that it's not the fuel filter itself. So that is why we look in another direction apart from the fuel filter. The diagnostic clue is that the fault occurred after the first time that the fuel filter was replaced. The DLC or Diagnostic Link connector is kept on the left hand side in this particular model and uses a 14-pin connector, not your typical 16-pin OBD2 connector. So you just plug in there, put in your adapter for your scan tool and it should be able to read. So what information have we got off the scan tool? Managed to get a few fault codes out of it. A P1470, P1187. This one is charge pressure control valve. Rail pressure monitoring is the second one there. Now just keep in mind that the customer did replace the intercooler hose or the turbo hose there, and that would change some of these variations. The rail pressure monitoring, that could be because of a lack of fuel going into the fuel pressure rail, or it could be the sensor itself. I did go into another section because this wasn't very specific to find some more information, and I did find other fault codes. I'll see if I can dig those up again. Not that I'm trying to push G-Scan or anything like that, but this G-Scan 3 is actually pretty good. Has a few extra features that I like. I've just gone into another section of Sprinter to try and bring up some other codes, and I've been successful. Here it says charge pressure control, too low, and this one is too high. Now remember I said that it had a split boost hose, and that would be as a result of that. I'll clear those codes out later. This one here, please refer to official manual. It's an 1187. What does that refer to? Let's have a look. And the beauty is you hit that little search thing and it comes straight up on the internet. If we click on that one, looks like a forum of some description, comes up with some information there, and it converts to a P code, which is a powertrain code. It's a P1187, rail pressure monitoring, control deviation. What does that mean? Too high pressure. And look, I'll explain what I think it is. Now these are notorious for O-ring failure, sucking in air, etc. That's what I'll be looking at next. And as it says here, I've changed the O-rings in the regulator. That's what they've done. Yeah, so this is a good feature of the G-Scan. My money is sort of on sucking in air somewhere, and according to like what I can see, that fuel filter, the customer has told me that this is the third fuel filter that's been put on. He put on one first when he did a service on it, then it played up, so he took it to a mechanic. The mechanic replaced it with another fuel filter and broke a clip apparently, but didn't replace it, hence all the cable ties. And then the customer has put a third fuel filter on there. So we need to figure out what's going on as opposed to replacing the parts again and again. I've chosen just a few data PIDs to have a look at. Keep in mind boost pressure, 14 psi, that's atmospheric pressure, so the vehicle's not started, that's normal. 29 degrees for our air intake temperature, that seems okay. It's getting warmish out here, but that seems reasonable. It's parked in the shade at the moment. Rail pressure, 26 psi, that's residual line pressure. If residual line pressure drops away, then we will find that you end up with hard starting, etc. I did notice there's a few little blips here between the 50 and the 20 something psi. Not sure if that's just a glitch in the matrix or if it is an issue. So I'll start it up and we'll have a look at our rail pressure in particular in view of that fault code that came through. Alright, so lots of squiggly lines. We're seeing rail pressure going up and down accordingly. It's setting at, what's that, 5,000 psi at idle, which is okay. We're not seeing any other problems there. Boost control valve was moving up and down accordingly. Boost pressure, same thing, was going up and down. Keep in mind we're not driving down the road. We're simply free revving, so that's not unusual to see these sort of situations here. Another feature of the G-Scan 3 that I've just discovered is what's called overlap, where you can lay over all your PIDs over the top of one another so you can see how they relate. If I was to rev it up, for instance, your rail pressure would go up, all these would go up accordingly and respond to one another. So that's not a bad feature, I haven't seen that one before. There's several things that the customer has changed and noted. One of the things was the turbo intake hose. I believe this was the one that he replaced, and that of course would have created a turbo leak and fault codes, etc. So if we have a bit of a goosey gander around the engine bay, do you notice anything a little bit strange? Let's zoom in on that funny looking fuel filter there. What do you notice? Yep, she's held down with cable ties. I'll give you a bit of a backstory to this. Alright, so this is the line that goes from the fuel filter through to the high pressure pump. Now that should never have any air in it, of course. So what we'll do is we'll rev it up and see if that gets any air in it. Could I have it rev, please? Look at that, you can clearly see air bubbles going through, can't you? So you can imagine cruising at 110 k's down the road, this thing gets full of air and then it shuts off. The EDC light comes on, says I don't want to play because I've got low pressure in my fuel rail. First things first, I'm going to have a look at this fuel filter. This seems to be the area where the problem is located, and I think what we can notice here is that someone has been here before whoever changed this fuel filter, you can see that the hose has been cut with some side cutters, and then they've just pushed it on further. So that might have been cracking through this hose. I'll have a look at that. This is the intake side, or the inlet side of the fuel system, and the outlet would be, the return one would be one of these. I'm not sure which one. The arrows seem to indicate that one. But either way, what I'm going to do is put on a separate fuel system, my own little fuel tank, feed it in through here, and if that solves the issue, then we know that it's back this way, isn't it? Or it's this piece here. If we continue to still have air bubbles through that outlet hose, then obviously that indicates that there's O-rings or hoses in this particular area feeding into our main pump, which is down there somewhere. Hello, main pump, our high pressure pump. Then we'll change O-rings and hoses, etc. So one thing that I want to do before I put in my little eliminator on my separate tank is I want to cut all these cable ties and then wiggle everything and see if that cuts the engine, or we see a big difference on our scan tool rail pressure. Then that way that'll tell me if this is causing the solution, or short-term solution of course, and that'll give us the area to look for next. Okay, let's start her up please. Rail pressure is up. Hang on. So our rail pressure went up there, what was it, about 10,000, 13,000 maximum, almost 14,000 psi. So that's good. Let's turn back to have a look and cut all these bits and pieces and see if that makes a difference. I'll give them a bit of a wiggle and see if that causes the fault to go away, or to create the fault, that is. Can't see any air bubbles at the moment. Don't want to cut anything I'm not meant to. But wow, look how floppy that is. That's insane. That's not good at all, is it? Just hang on a sec. Okay, have a look at this. That's not good, is it? That's going to create all sorts of vibrations. Can I have the revs up, please? Can't really see any air bubbles in those hoses, but yeah, I'm going to put some rubber to hold that in place. That's pretty dodgy, hey? What about this pressure sensor down the bottom? No, can't see anything coming through, but this is at low revs, of course, isn't it? Can I have the revs up again, please? Okay, you can see the amount of air bubbles there. They're slowly disappearing as we come back to idle. So yeah, I'll put on that separate fuel tank now, feed it in and see if it's on that side of the fuel filter, or if it's on the outlet side of the fuel filter. You know how I keep banging on about a good visual inspection. Now, as I mentioned before, this has been replaced at some stage. Someone's hacked the end off of this hose here, and this actual clamp is incorrect. That's not the right sort of clamp anyway. It's probably actually run out of thread, so it wouldn't be clamping it properly. But check this out. If we have a look on the inside, what do you notice? It's blocked. Okay, so it doesn't matter how much hose you know, the hose is just collapsed inside and sucked in through there, and obviously there's going to get fuel coming through, but the pressure will be lower and probably sucking air through the side here as well. Not sure the best method, if I've got to replace the hose itself, or if I just can clamp onto the other end of this with an appropriate style of clamp like this, and a decent brand new piece of rubber hose. So this is one particular area. I pulled this off and I thought, that's pretty funny, I better show you guys. It's actually blocked. I'll show you more once I get it all apart. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I was always of the opinion that rubber hose should have the hole in the middle, don't you think? Not seeing it, guys. So that's totally blocked. I don't know how it was. Must have like a piece of rubber that's fallen over and acting like a flap, so it'll allow fuel to come through and then flap over and, you know, perhaps suck air and, you know, osmosis. That's where we get, you know, air and water can get pulled in through the hose, even externally through tiny little cracks that we can't see. So that's what I reckon that particular problem is in this case. I'm not stopping here by any means. I'm still looking further. O-rings need to be replaced. This needs to be replaced. Anything with rubber on it, pads should be replaced. Remember, 500,000 Ks. It doesn't live forever, this thing. We've got to do some maintenance on it. Good quality maintenance, guys, not just cut the end off a hose and hope for the best. So what I've made is a separate fuel tank source for our diesel here. It's very helpful. It's just out of a, I don't know, 25 litre, something like that, 5 litre, sorry. And I've got two elbow fittings that go into it. One fitting has a hose that goes down to the bottom, and of course that's our pickup one that goes to the engine. And this one here is our return one. I'm not going to return it back into the tank here. I'm actually just got it into a tray, and I've got a spanner holding the hose in place. That way the hose won't fall out. Hopefully that should be okay. Reason I'm doing that is because I don't want any dirty fuel or any issues to go back into my clean container here. And of course it's got a little hand pump here, a primer, so that I can get a lot of the air out going up to the filter itself. So I've got it going up here into my hose fitting that I've just pulled off before, and then the return is the one that comes off, or that goes from the actual vehicle itself. That way I'm not worried about any fuel coming from the tank into here. I'm now going to start it up and see if we've got rid of those air bubbles down at the pump. If not, we might have to start looking backwards. I've now got all the air out of the line. I'm happy with that. There's no air bubbles going into the fuel filter itself. Not a problem. We'll rev it up now and we'll have a look at that hose and see if there's any air bubbles. Can you rev it up, please? Alright, I don't know about you guys, but I couldn't see any air bubbles at all, especially in comparison to what we saw before. Yep, so hopefully we've got that sorted. I will replace the O-rings as well, but it looks like it was just that hose that had collapsed, sucking in air from the outside. I've had a bit of a yarn with the customer and he's told me to go ahead with the repairs. Unfortunately, this little fella here, the clip that's missing that was broken by the last mechanic or customer, whatever, I've got to buy the entire nylon pipe that goes down to the high pressure hose. Same thing with this T-piece here, that's got to be replaced, and the whole thing gets replaced, not just the O-ring. Another thing. This fella here, now remember that was the one that had the piece of hose that created the main issue. I can't just get that stepped piece of hose because it's 10mm here and it's 8mm on that side, so it's got to be a stepped hose. After ringing Mercedes, this entire line, it's a nylon hose, has to go all the way back to the fuel tank. Not going to happen. So what I'm going to do is I've come up with an adapter, and I've got 10mm on one side and 8mm on the other side, and I will put a piece of hose in between there, and between there and this fella here, and use correct fuel clamps. That way it won't pinch the rubber hose. It's only low pressure on this side anyway, so it shouldn't be an issue. But yeah, obviously when you buy genuine, they want you to buy the entire thing. But hopefully that's got it all sorted. I feel pretty confident that that will fix his issue. As you can see, I've just put my little adapter in the middle there, and 8mm hose here, 10mm hose here, and that should eliminate that issue that we were having there before with that dodgy piece of hose. Dodgy as, bloke, dodgy as. Yeah, so that should fix that. And when I get all these other parts from Mercedes, then I can install them, including this main hose that goes down. Of course I need the O-rings, but you know, blah 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 blah, it all comes as one part. Of course it does. Okay, lesson learnt. Make sure you replace old crusty stuff. Don't try and dodge it up. You're probably wondering to yourself, what's wrong with this piece of hose? What caused the issue? And is it a collapsed hose? Is there something stuck in the middle? Look guys, I think we're going to have to do an autopsy. Well guys, I'm going in. Well, I think we're ready to make a start. Doctor, do you concur? I concur. Nurses, swab. Okay, clamp. Oh, actually, clamp is what we're trying to get rid of. So, can we get this one off easily? Oh, look at that. Legend. No bleeding. It's good. And this fella over here, it's a little bit tighter. We might have to use a incisor. I don't know. We'll make up some words, shall we? Our anti-clamp device. Just removal of that clamp there. That's off. It's all good. Careful with the patient. It's okay. Alright, let's make an incision. Scalpel. Alright, let's go. Oh, the epidermis is quite thick on this one. The force is strong with this one. Let's just open that up and see what we find. Oh, yes, it's as I suspected. So what's happened is the inner lining of the hose has actually collapsed. So see the lining itself, it's made up of several sections. It's got rubber on the outside. It has a mesh, like a string mesh, to reinforce it. And then it has this inner lining. Now that inner lining, I believe what's actually happened, which may have been caused by the person that worked on this last, is they saw that this had cracks on it, this end piece, and rather than replacing the thing itself, this end, or the inner lining of it, has then folded in over itself, and that caused, like I said originally, like a little one-way valve. If we open it up, and you could imagine that the fuel is trying to get through, but it can't, as a result of this being folded in like that, you see. And that's the reason that it looks blocked, because, hey, it was blocked. It was because that inner lining, when they tried to push the pipe back on, in that way, it's actually folded that inner lining over and created a blockage within the pipe itself, and of course that created a flow issue, and of course that would bring on our EDC light. That's the result of the arrest that caused the vehicle to unfortunately pass away on the side of the road. But being amazing, we were able to do a bit of a transplant with a different hose and get that up and running again. Awesome. Okay, the parts have turned up. Now for the official unboxing. Genuine parts. We've got a O-ring here. Like I said, genuine. Only took about a day, which is pretty good. We've got that clear hose, the one that had that fitting broken on it. So we've got that hose to replace the broken one. Oh, hang on. There's also a little O-ring attached to it there. Another O-ring, and that T-piece fitting, which I believe has a seal in it as well, that only came as the entire unit. So all genuine parts. Wasn't overly expensive, especially for me. I'm not paying for it. Okay, so genuine parts, and they're here, so I can now fit them to the vehicle and get the vehicle up and running for the customer. And then we can road test it and make sure that we've sorted the problem, diagnosed it correctly, and then repaired it to a tested outcome. Just a very quick tip here, guys. Doing these stupid clips on the Mercs are a bit of a messes with your head. You normally would think that you'd pull this clip out, but you don't. You actually force it up, and that separates the two legs, holding it in place like that, you see. And once you press on this, it pushes the legs apart, then you can pull it off. But what you've got to do is, once you've pushed this back into place, you then pull this little leg back, like that, and then that will hold it into place permanently. It kind of works opposite to what you would normally think. Just a bit of a heads up for young players. Got all the bibs and bobs in place, including this T-piece section here with a new O-ring in there. This hose that goes all the way down the bottom, that's that clear hose that we were looking at before, with a new O-ring and that special clip that I showed you before. This adapter piece that I've made up, going from a 10mm hose down to an 8mm hose, and of course, as I mentioned already, this hose that travels all the way down there to the high pressure pump. So we'll look at that shortly and see if we've got any air bubbles at revs. That's the issue, at revs. So we'll just start it up now and see if we can get any air bubbles to come through that clear line. Okay, thanks, start her up. Okay, bring the revs up, thanks. Just let it idle for a bit. Now I did see a couple of air bubbles come through. I'm not sure if the filter is still getting a couple of air bubbles out or not. The only real way, of course, is to do a road test. So that's what we'll do next. I've just been on a 20-kilometre road test. It's getting warm here today, guys. We've got an estimated 43 degrees here on Saturday. We're surrounded by fires. All sections of Australia have been alight. There's smoke everywhere, yet the bills still have to be paid. We've got to work. I'm quite happy with the results on this Merc Sprinter. It's only a 2.2 litre engine. That being said, with the air conditioner on full blast, cruising along the highway at 100 kilometres an hour, fifth gear, I was able to nail it up to 110 and it was still climbing. That's power for you, mate. So the only thing that really held it back was that fella there, the fella with no hole in the middle. Get rid of that and it's up and running, ready to go. I'll be honest with you, I'm not a fan of the diesel, dirty, filthy, stinking things, but once again, it pays for the bills until the diesel goes the way of the dodo as a result of hybrid and electric vehicles. Soon coming to a workshop near you. But in the meantime, guys, we've got to deal with diesels, particularly here in Australia, quite a large amount of them in comparison to petrol engines. So if you did enjoy this video today and you haven't already, please subscribe to the channel, give it a like, feel free to comment down below, and hey, don't forget about that notification bell. You don't want to miss any future videos, do you? Of course not, nah. Alright, so until next time guys, this is MiracleMAX signing off. I will catch you later.